The Garden of Quiet Hours. Part 1. The Empty Chair by the Window. There was an empty chair by the window, one that had not been touched in almost a year. The cushions still bore the soft imprint of someone who used to sit there every morning with a cup of tea and a notebook open on her lap. Sunlight would filter through the lace curtain, dancing across her hair as she scribbled down thoughts, recipes, and poems about rain. That chair belonged to Eleanor. Now, it belonged to silence. Thomas hadn't moved anything in the room since the funeral. The teacup still sat on the windowsill, faintly stained with old chamomile. The notebook remained closed, its last words penned in looping cursive: "The garden needs marigolds. They smell like sunlight." He hadn't planted anything since she left. The once blooming garden now lay in disarray, wild, brown, brittle. Eleanor used to spend hours with her hands in the earth, humming softly while she worked. It had been her sanctuary, her way of listening to life's whispers. Without her, Thomas couldn't even bear to look out the window. Most days he sat at the kitchen table, the newspaper spread before him unread, the kettle left boiling too long. Neighbors came by at first, casseroles, cards, awkward words, but over time they stopped. Grief makes people uncomfortable. They don't know what to say, and sometimes, neither did he. Time didn't pass for Thomas so much as it stalled, a haze of endless afternoons, of untouched books and forgotten errands. He had lost more than his wife, he had lost the rhythm of his life. Then one Tuesday morning in early March, something unusual happened. It started with a letter. It arrived in a small ivory envelope, slipped neatly into the mail slot without a stamp. Just his name on the front, Thomas, in a handwriting that was both unfamiliar and careful. He hesitated before opening it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded crisply in half. The message was simple: "The garden misses her too. Maybe you could sit with it for a while?" No signature. No return address. Thomas read it twice. Then a third time. He looked toward the back door, which hadn't been opened in months. Beyond it lay the overgrown path to Eleanor's beloved garden. He thought about the broken pots, the dried vines, the stubborn weeds. Then he thought about marigolds, their scent, their stubborn brightness, and her words.
"They smell like sunlight."
He didn't move that day. Or the next. But the letter stayed on the table, under his mug. Quietly waiting. Part 2. The Gentle Return. It was a week later when Thomas finally stepped outside. The door creaked open as if exhaling old memories. He squinted at the sunlight, gentler than he remembered. The wind carried the faintest trace of lavender and earth. The path to the garden was cracked and covered in dried leaves. Yet as he walked down it, something familiar stirred in his chest, a hollow that throbbed, not with pain, but with possibility. The garden was wild, yes, tangled with weeds, petals long gone, and dry soil cracked from months of neglect. But under the surface, life was still present. Tiny green shoots peeked out from corners, and a stubborn patch of mint had spread along the fence. Thomas stood at the garden gate, staring. He didn't know what he expected: a voice, a sign, perhaps even another letter. But there was only the sound of wind brushing the tall grass. So he sat. There was an old wooden bench Eleanor had insisted on placing beneath the dogwood tree. It was her favorite spot, the place she called her quiet hours. She'd sit there every morning after tending the flowers, just breathing, just listening. Thomas lowered himself onto the bench. It groaned under his weight, but held firm. He closed his eyes. For the first time in months, he let himself remember. Her laugh. The dirt on her cheeks after a day of planting. The way she called each flower by name. The way she believed everything broken could bloom again. He stayed there for nearly an hour. He didn't cry. He didn't speak. But something loosened in him, a knot he didn't realize he'd tied. The next morning, another envelope waited at the door.
Start with the mint. Strong. Just like you.
Again, and signed. Thomas blinked. His hands trembled, but he smiled. That afternoon, he pulled on his old gardening gloves. Part 3. Planting the Present. The days passed differently after that. Each morning, Thomas would find a new letter, short, simple suggestions scribbled in the same careful hand.
Pull the weeds from the eastern bed. Give the soil some room to breathe. Check under the rose bushes. You'll find something waiting. The daisies might still bloom. Give them a chance.
He didn't know who was sending the letters. A neighbor? A friend? A kind stranger who had once admired Eleanor's garden? It didn't matter. What mattered was that someone still remembered. That someone still believed the garden, and perhaps Thomas himself, wasn't beyond saving. He followed the notes like breadcrumbs, each one pulling him deeper into the garden and back into himself. He fixed the broken trellis. He mended the stone path. He found Eleanor's old garden tools in the shed, rusty, but usable. He even found her seed collection, neatly labeled in glass jars: hope, courage, April stars, autumn fire. Names she'd given the flowers herself. By mid-April, color returned to the garden. Tiny buds pushed up through the soil. The mint patch thrived. Bees returned. Butterflies danced between stalks of lavender. And Thomas began to hum, not a tune he knew, but something soft, something instinctive. Sometimes, he'd speak to the flowers aloud. Tell them stories about Eleanor. Share how lonely he'd been. How afraid he was to forget. Sometimes, he'd read aloud from her old notebook, still filled with poems about nature, about healing, about light returning after darkness. And sometimes, though he never saw anyone, he would find fresh footprints near the garden gate. Part 4. The Girl with the Ribbon. It was on a rainy Thursday when he finally met her. She appeared at the edge of the garden, holding a yellow umbrella and wearing rain boots splattered with paint. She couldn't have been more than 12. A green ribbon was tied around her braid. Thomas was kneeling near the marigolds. The girl hesitated at first, then stepped closer. She held something in her hand, a sealed envelope.
I didn't mean to scare you,
she said.
I'm Emma. I live next door.
Thomas nodded slowly. So, it was you? She bit her lip.
The letters. Some of them. Not all.
He blinked. What do you mean? Emma held out the envelope.
This one was for you. It was in her notebook.
He took it, fingers trembling. The paper was old, but the ink had not faded.
If I'm gone and you find this, promise me you'll return to the garden. The earth heals what the heart can't. It will remind you that you're still part of something alive. Something beautiful. I'll be here, in every petal, every breeze, every blooming thing. Eleanor.
Thomas exhaled sharply. He turned away, the tears coming quickly now. Emma sat beside him on the bench, quiet.
I used to see her from my window,
she said softly.
She waved at me every day. Sometimes she gave me flowers over the fence. I missed her too.
They sat like that for a long time, an old man and a young girl, listening to the rain tap the leaves and the wind move through the marigolds. That night, Thomas placed the letter in Eleanor's notebook, right after the marigold entry. Part 5. The Garden of Quiet Hours. By midsummer, the garden no longer looked like a place of mourning. It was alive, pulsing with color and sound. The marigolds stood proud and golden. The lavender buzzed with bees. The old dogwood tree stretched wide, casting gentle shade across the bench where Thomas now sat each morning, notebook in hand. He had started writing more regularly, sometimes even poems. Not perfect ones, Eleanor had always been the poet, but simple words that captured what he felt. Things like, "Some days, I miss her more when the garden is most beautiful." As if beauty makes the absence sharper. He didn't expect to stop missing her. But he had stopped fearing that the ache would swallow him whole. Emma still came by often. She had become a fixture in the garden, always with a new idea, a birdhouse she painted, stepping stones made of concrete and shells, or wildflowers she said would
make the bees dance.
One afternoon, as they placed painted rocks near the marigolds, Emma looked up and asked,
"Do you think she knows we're still here?"
Thomas smiled. "I think she never really left." That evening, he brewed 2 cups of tea again, chamomile, just as Eleanor liked, and placed one beside the chair by the window. He didn't say anything aloud. The gesture was enough. Later that night, as the wind moved softly through the branches, he returned to the bench beneath the dogwood. The air was warm, the scent of mint and soil lingering. He opened the notebook, found a blank page, and wrote, "This is not the end. Not of grief. Not of love. But a beginning, quieter, slower, full of light in unexpected places." He looked up. The stars blinked gently overhead. The marigolds glowed in the moonlight. And for the first time in a long time, Thomas felt whole, not because the pain had gone, but because it had finally made room for something else. Something tender. Something alive. Something like peace.